Welcome to everyone joining us from around the world. I know we have people from all over the place. I'm here in Germany. My name is James Carnes, and we're here today, Thursday, July 8th, 2021, for the launch of an incredible book by an incredible author by the name of Lynn Yap, The Altruistic Capitalist. Lynn and I met years ago while working at Adidas. Lynn was my finance counterpart, and we worked together on a project that was called Open Source. And the idea that we were challenged to figure out was how to quantify the value of collaboration beyond just financial assessment. And everything that had been done before that in the company was really about figuring out a return on investment in terms of dollars and euros. And so it really sparked some very interesting conversation between Lynn and I was absolutely excited to see her continuing this work and this idea of understanding the value for the future and how we need to think about things in a completely different way. And so over the next 30 minutes or so, what we'd like to do is really understand from Lynn a bit more about a couple of things. So over that time, I'll ask her a couple of questions. And so you'll get to see her and get to know her. For those of you who don't have the pleasure of knowing her already, one is I just want to understand why now? Where did this book come from? I have my insights and my connections to her, but I'd like you to hear from her where this idea came from her experience, having been a successful entrepreneur and working at some big companies like Adidas and Estee Lauder. I'd like to get her point of view on what she thinks is important for companies to keep in mind with this challenge that she's outlined with altruist capitalism. Third, I really want her to kind of explain to us what role we can play as individuals, or what role the individual can play, because the book really dives nicely into the corporate side of things, but not everybody is a CEO or an executive and feels like they can be empowered to make change in that way. So I want to hear from her about that. And then I'd really like for her to explain to us what she has in mind for the future. So those are the four big questions I have for her. I'm excited to be here and honored that she's asked me to join in this momentous occasion. And with that, I'd like to welcome Lynn to join us. There
Hello.
Hi, Lynn.
Hi,
Welcome.
James. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being part of this special occasion. I'm so happy that you can be here with me. So thank you. I also want to thank my parents for staying up. I also saw that Maylee's online. She's also dialing in from Malaysia. So to my family and friends who have been such great supporters in this past year and who has shared with me, been so generous with their love. Thank you so much for being here, and for the audience to be here today as well. Another shout out I want to give is to Sean Tracy, Stella Zarija, Bill Simpson, Marianne Tate. These were my beta readers. Thank you so much for reading the early versions of my manuscript and for helping it get to the version it is today.
So for the rest of you who are out there joining us from all over the place, we'd love for you to type in where you're joining from. We know that Malaysia's online late at night, so that's great, but really love for you just to type in and get a sense for where everybody's joining us from. So Lynn, you wrote this book starting a year ago, and I know you well enough, but you've had this successful career in the corporate world, also equally successful outside of the corporate world with some of the amazing work that you do to get young women involved in entrepreneurship, give them confidence, and those two worlds kind of coming together makes a lot of sense for me. But why? Why did you write this book? What compelled you in the last year to really bring this to life?
So I have to say, this book has had its seeds in different forms and different triggers over the years. But really, for someone who has had a very traditional business background, I started out as a corporate lawyer. I worked in investment banking. I got a traditional MBA from the Wharton School. And I wanted to see, I had these questions about, can business be done differently? And, when you talk about when we worked together at Adidas and how, we were looking at measuring impact. What's the impact of business? You know, our purpose at Adidas was through sports, we have the power to change lives. But what does changing lives really mean? You know, how do we measure that impact? So I had all these questions because when I look at financial statements and when I look at rows of financial data, we don't see what it means, all the business activities that we do on the people and the planet. We don't see what is the value that the brand has on the customers, on the communities, on our employees, and even the partner suppliers that we have. So this is kind of why I felt compelled to write this book because I had all these questions, and I wanted to kind of bring some of the knowledge and the research I had done to the audience. And because I think a lot of it starts with having the right mindset. A lot of times when I talk about businesses doing good, I hear, oh, but, shouldn't, oh, can't, you know, this doesn't fit into the budget. I don't have time. You might understand the budget one. You might be familiar with that a little.
You help me with that.
Yes. So, you know, all these questions that say, well, it doesn't fit in how we do business. So I wanted to write this book also to kind of change that mindset, because I think transformation and shifts starts with mindset.
So you talk about that as a mindset, then where are we now? Like where would you say companies in particular, let's start there, where are they at today? And the second question with that, and I'll come back to it, is I want to know, what is the biggest challenge that you think they face from that mindset to where you think they need to go? So where are they today? Help me understand, like what's the status quo?
I think there's starting to be a shift. I think what COVID did was expose some of our global problems that are at tipping points. So think about climate change and inequality. And the other thing about shift and transformation is catalyst. And COVID-19, I think, is a catalyst that we should capture and ride on that momentum. So where are companies today? I want to say that we have been in this mindset of shareholder capitalism, where we focus on the bottom line for the last 50 years or so. And this started with Milton Friedman, renowned world economist. In 1970, he penned an article in the New York Times saying, the social responsibility of business is to increase profits. And all the business schools and all our business textbooks write about that, right? And you know, that's what I was taught as well. And on top of that, all our business processes, all our systems are based around that. So thinking about how we look at financial returns, we only look at financial returns. We don't look at the other impacts. And then thinking about financial analysts as well. The financial analysts ask the executive every quarter. So what did you do this quarter? What is your forecast for next quarter? Did you make it this quarter? And all of that is centered then on short-term thinking. We don't think out, okay, what is it that we're doing today that can help the future generation, that we look further out? And I'm going to go back again to when we work on innovation together, sometimes some things just don't fit in that 1-year budget cycle, talking about processes, you know, things like diversity and inclusion, that takes a longer time to build out, to make someone feel inclusive. Yeah, maybe you can go out and hire someone and have a diverse workforce. You meet all the quota or something like that. But to make someone feel inclusive, to have that culture, takes a longer time, takes longer than a year. So it starts with a mindset, which translates then into the culture, the values that drive a company. And then you talk about changing the strategy and what is the systems and the processes that need to evolve in order that we can be more holistic and to do well in business.
I mean, you talk a little bit in the book about how there's a system, but you give examples of some individuals who kind of broke the system, still staying within the framework of this corporate world. Do you think it's possible for them to actually go beyond the typical status of sort of like what you see a lot of today, which is do no harm? I think you talk about that as like the base level, or getting into donations. A lot of companies will donate to a charity. What has to come beyond that for us to really get into a practice where we're healthy as a society, and not just sort of checking the box?
Mm-hmm. Very good question. And I see business activities as categorized into three categories, what I call the impact model.
Mm-hmm.
Level one is the do no harm. So we're operating within the confines of legal regulations. Think about, and so this is very much in the Milton Friedman world of the sole responsibility of businesses is to increase profits. But lately, we have corporate social responsibility activities, CSR, that's then related. Okay, if we have a little bit of extra, we should do some donations, we should volunteer some time at the local community. That is the philanthropic level 2 impact.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's that level 3, value creation impact, where you're thinking, and this is where the world, I think, is shifting to, right? We are shifting towards thinking about stakeholders holistically, and that is people and the planet. So people encompasses employees, customers, suppliers, and the communities that businesses are in. And that is level 3 impact. And talking about companies that have broken the mold, to your question, I can think of big companies, I can think of small companies. But the one I want to highlight today is Best Buy. Now, if you recall, sometime in 2012, Best Buy was not doing so well. Amazon was knocking at their doors. They were losing a lot of money because people were just starting to buy their electronics on Amazon. Forget about going to Best Buy to get them. They were just, looking to see what Best Buy was doing in their stores and then going to Amazon to purchase it. So they were bleeding money. And the analysts, I'm really knocking on financial analysts today, and what the analyst was saying is like, yeah, I used to be one, but and what the analyst was saying, and this is what we learned in business school, slash costs, cut down the stores, close all the stores, and cut people, cut headcount, stop the bleeding. But Hubert Joly, the CEO who was brought in to turn around Best Buy, he said, no, I am not going to do that. This is the last option. I'm not going to cut people from the business at any state. Right. And he did two things that I think are related to the altruistic capitalist mindset. First, he said, I'm going to put purpose at the heart of our business. And their purpose is to enrich the lives of others through technology. And he didn't write sales manuals. He didn't write sales guidebooks to say, all right, retail team, this step 1, do this when you see the customer. Step 2, do this to the customer. He put this and he empowered his sales team to enrich the lives of others through technology. And what his team did was develop this strategy called active aging. And what it is they focus then on helping the elderly market. How is it that we can help the older people in our families, in our communities, to live independently, safer, and longer? So what it was they sold connected devices, they sold mobility devices, things that can help the elderly in our community to live independently on their own at home. And the other thing that they did, and this you will probably appreciate, collaboration. They collaborated with Amazon. Now, if you go back to previous thinking, competitors would typically, use their resources, use their precious resources to compete with each other, to steal market share from each other. But what Hubert Joly did was, he went to Jeff Bezos and said, hey, can we sell Alexa in our store? You don't have the physical store. We have physical stores. Do you want to do that? And so what that did was it created value for both companies. It actually enabled Best Buy to grow their sales and also help with their bottom line. And in the end, it also helped with employee morale, which of course was struggling when Best Buy was, bleeding money at the start. But because they felt empowered, they felt very much tied to the purpose of enriching the lives of others, that employee retention increased, and they actually was able to increase their sales through this whole strategy and through the purpose.
It reminds me, this is sort of a theme that you developed throughout the book. I mean, it's all about purpose, of course, right? Like creating profit through purpose, and that it's not even a balance, it's that they're like synergistic. And you kind of touched on it just now, and I want to go a little deeper into that, how two fundamental things that you kind of outlined. One is there's an opportunity to look at competition completely different, right? So whether it's collaboration or shared purpose. But the other one that you mentioned that was sort of the first thing that he did at Best Buy, which was put people first. And you mentioned looking at stakeholders differently. And so this kind of fundamental shift from profit or value generation being about filling sort of an abstract bank account or a shareholder purse really shifts in your book to value being about how people individually experience and receive a profit, let's call it, from a company. And I love this balance that you create, and I want to kind of dive into that with also how you give examples of what an individual, a person, right? So it's not all about corporate structures and measuring things in very abstract ways. You get into detail about like what an individual can do to live this. So again, I said it earlier, if you're not the CEO, you're not an executive, you give some nice examples there. Talk me through that, how you see the role that people can play on their own on a very, very day-to-day level in bringing this to life.
I think that's a really important question, James. I'm going to talk about it in two different ways. Firstly, as individuals and a company. Now, we forget that businesses, it's not just an entity with a soul. Businesses and companies are made up of individuals like us, and we have a part. I mean, both of us, when we were at Adidas, we also worked to see how we could increase the impact, the social impact in the things that we do, in the innovations that we created. So in our own way, we just have to look to see what we have in our hands and to make that change. So I'm going to just give like a few different examples, if I may. Firstly, if we are in product development, for instance, what is the one small tweak that we can do in our product in order to make it sustainable? If we work in finance, what are the other metrics that we can look at in order to understand the impact of what our business activities have? And if we're a team manager or a team lead and we have a team that reports to us, what are the training and development opportunities we can give them? How can we make the team more diverse and inclusive to empower everyone to be at their very best? So that's individuals in a business context.
So you're talking about breaking it down regardless of your role in a company and asking very, very basic questions, because your point is they all add up. 7 billion individual contributions add up to something. It's not just governments and large corporations and you make this change. What's your other one, your second point on that?
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing is we're not just individuals, and we're just not employees. We're individuals in different. We are consumers. We are members of the community. We are investors as well. So be intentional. Be conscious. Be mindful of where is it that we are buying from. What products are we buying? Who are we working with? Who do we choose to work with? Who do we have? Who do we want to have on our team? And then who do we invest our money in? Understand that. I mean, with technology today, we have knowledge at our fingertips. So educate ourselves, understand how these different businesses are run and how they operate, and then take action to support these businesses. And then I want to say the last thing and most important thing is to spread the word, is to share what you have learned with others, because these little shifts can start a movement. And I'm going to bring back to little Greta Thunberg. She was 15 years old when she, actually, it goes a little bit back before. She started with her parents. She said, you guys are not recycling enough. So she actually started the conversation at the dinner table with her parents. And then she said, well, I want to also ask my government, what are they doing? So she started spending her school days outside the Swedish parliament, 15 years old with her little backpack, and saying, I'm protesting because the government is not doing enough. She was one little girl. And leadership is not a CEO. It's not
Right.
someone with a big title or a big company. It's anyone who has a purpose, who has the courage to stand up for what they believe in and to spread the word, to share that vision of a possible new future. What is that future? And so she started this movement that then became Fridays for the Future. And that is now a whole generation across the globe who is saying, let's do something about climate change. So that's what we can do as individuals.
You get into that. I liked your Greta example because you talk about courage or her having sort of an awakening. But you also go into these very specific examples. You even give them sort of caricatures in the book, but you talk about the role that very unexpected things can play. We all can actually take part in to move this forward. Talk about being mindful on a regular basis, like constantly being mindful of what's happening around you. You talk about being patient, in it for the long run, having the grit of the athlete and being curious. And I think that's a big one because especially my experience with a lot of executives is they lose their curiosity because they're expected to know everything. What is it that brought you to this conclusion that sort of each of us has a role to play on a very, very fundamental level, and maybe talk a little bit about those three things?
Yeah. So let's see. I think in order to create value for all stakeholders, for the people and for the planet, it's really a human-driven approach. And the characters, how I portrayed the different three characteristics is the mindset of the monk, the mindset of the 5-year-old, which is curiosity, and the mindset of the athlete, which is grit. And these three mindsets came out of interviews with 50-odd interviews with people working in large companies, people who are social entrepreneurs, nonprofits, and investors in sustainable funds. And the things that keep coming up with these three mindsets. And I touch a little bit on being mindful, being intentional about how you are, because in that you also need to understand the values that drive you and what is your purpose. And then the second one is curiosity. I think with curiosity, it solves two things. One, it is asking the right question. So knowing what is the problem, really understanding the problem. So often we rush to answer the question. We rush to come up with a solution without putting ourselves in the position of the person who is suffering from that problem. And then number two is when we're curious, we also accumulate different knowledge. We understand the different subjects. We have knowledge of different subjects that can make us a bit more creative and more innovative. And maybe I'm going to pass this back to you now, your understanding of how innovation then really can help us develop problems to solutions. Because I think this curiosity, being curious, as you mentioned, helps us develop some very innovative solutions that we might not see before if we're doing things the same way all the time.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think, I have a specific experience having worked with Adidas in this regard, but I can tell you that the role of innovation is to provide solutions to problems people have in a new way, right? So whatever that problem is, whatever that challenge you're facing, and I think that purpose actually can provide a competitive advantage. An example would be, in the last few years, people no longer want to feel the guilt of purchasing product that is not sustainable. It's not recyclable. You buy it and you have this awakening that it's trash. And that happened a lot over the last year in COVID. One example was all of these sneaker collectors now had spent 3 months at home staring at their sneaker collection and started to think to themselves, what exactly do I own this for? What will I do with this? When I'm in a pandemic and I have nobody to kind of socialize with this about. So more of that happened. People started to realize, in a sense of inclusivity, that they weren't getting their fair share of attention or time or salary. And I think innovation can play a role to find completely new ways to make purpose your competitive advantage at a company. And I hope to see more of that. I hope to see that happen more often. I'd love to get some questions in. And for those of you who've been listening, I realize you guys are from all over the place. New York City, Michigan, Gostenhof, Nuremberg, right around the corner from me. So if you have some questions, put them in there. I want to start with one of them that we have here from the Pacific Northwest. And it's a great question right there, because it's asking essentially, what is the hurdle, besides just having available funding or money, what is the biggest hurdle to getting more investment from corporations into these long-term projects? What's keeping them from doing it, or what are some of the things that need to happen for them to do that more?
Great question, Max. And I think one of the biggest hurdles is still thinking in that mindset. Sometimes the leaders of the corporations have not realized that the contexts have shifted. We have evolved from thinking that, the world is no longer flat. We now need to shift in terms of thinking, creating value creation, that we need to focus on what are the different stakeholder interests and how we can meet those interests. And so it really starts with the mindset of understanding our purpose and rooting our strategy in that purpose. And then all the other things will start to shift. So whether it's related to systems, whether it's related to processes, I think then that will start to shift. Because we have started to see the shift in the investor community as well. In the past year, we have seen a big inflow of funds into sustainability. So at the moment, in terms of sustainability funds, 80% of the money is in Europe. And part of that is because Europe has a lot of regulations to achieve a net zero emissions by 2050. So that's why there's a lot of money that's flowing into European sustainability funds. And these sustainability funds then invest in companies that are very much focused on the environment, very much focused on social impact as well as governance. So I think when we see there are so many things that are driving companies to make this change. But one of the things, internal things, is to know that is for companies to realize, hey, the context has shifted and we need to shift our mindset and the way we do things too. And thank you for that question.
Max, I don't know if we answered that exactly as you were hoping, but I think that some good insights from Lynn there. Another really good question here from Stella. And I think that's one that I really want to hear your point of view on. There are so many things, just in the last year, if we're realistic. I mean, they were there before, but they kind of erupted and became more important for us to look at. How do you choose? How does a leader choose between major environmental issues, social justice, inclusivity, supporting women in business and industry? And you can really create a huge list of all the things that we need to solve over the next years. How do they choose? How do you prioritize?
Another very good question. Thank you, Stella, for that. It is a difficult one, but I think I'm going to go back into the mindset of being mindful. When we understand our purpose, when we understand what drives us, what are the values, being reflective on what our strengths are, I think that helps us then prioritize. So I'm going to go back, since James, you're here. You know this too. When we were at Adidas, through sports, we have the power to change lives. It made sense for us to focus on things that we had knowledge in. We had product development knowledge in sneaker development. Things that are related to the environment, because 300 million pairs of sneakers end up in landfills every year. That's one statistic. When I first heard it, I thought, that's crazy. That's every single American throwing away a pair of sneakers every year. And so that's kind of why it was important for us then to develop sneakers that were sustainable. If you remember, we were talking about the single ingredient sneaker that could be recycled and put back into an environment to create a regenerative economy. And I think that's where we should be prioritizing areas that we have knowledge, we have interest in, and it's part of the business purpose. It's part of our individual purpose. So I'm going to pull it back into knowing yourself and knowing your strengths.
I think it's a really good answer to that, and I just want to take away from my side. I think what I take out of that is the importance of not feeling overwhelmed to solve everything at once. And as you said, focus on the things that maybe you're strongest at solving or closest to you or matter most to you. Because I definitely feel overwhelmed over the last year. Like I need to be involved in every single thing, and we'll never get anything done doing that. We have another good question from an Andres Lawrence. Hey, Andy.
Hey, Andy.
Great question. Who should take the lead? Should it be consumers? Should it be the corporations? I mean, I think there's a lot of sort of hot potato going on in the world right now about that. What's your point of view on that?
Another good question, Andy. I think, as I said, we're not just an employee. We're not just consumers. We're not just a team lead. We play multiple roles. And what is it that's within our power that we can do today? I think there's a big movement. So, of course, nonprofits and governments, and that's why I spoke to nonprofits as well. Like, what is it that they should do? What are their roles? And I think nonprofits and governments have a role in solving global issues, but one of the more powerful ones is corporates, because I believe in capitalism. I think capitalism is a tool like technology that we can use to make a difference. Capitalism promotes competition, helps with innovation. It gives the market what it wants. So I think that, that's kind of why I think that when companies do good, profits naturally flow. And we have the businesses then have a big role to play in solving some of these global problems. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add to that you've talked about that before, how, it used to be the expectation that governments should take the lead role because they can regulate their own individual stakeholders. And you mentioned how corporations are really now much more capable of crossing national borders and boundaries and having a bigger impact globally because they represent people without the nationalistic point of view. And so I think that's an interesting part of you saying corporations probably need to play a bigger role than they're playing today.
Yeah, because they also have the assets in which to create these solutions, to create these innovations. Think about the collaboration that Adidas had with Allbirds. I seem to be talking a lot about Adidas today. But in the past, you wouldn't think that two sneaker producers, developers, would collaborate to create a sneaker with less than 3 kilograms of carbon emissions. Now, the average sneaker has been studied that the average sneaker produces 12 kilograms of carbon emissions. And for two sneaker competitors to understand, all right, we want to eliminate or reduce carbon emissions because this is important for our planet as their purpose. For these two competitors to collaborate, I think that is really a sign that this is how businesses can really shift the conversation. And we saw it in COVID as well. We have public and private corporations coming together to develop not just one vaccine, but multiple vaccines, to share that knowledge, share the research to solve a global problem. And we should really capture that momentum in order to make this shift go a scale. That's what I would say.
Lynn, we're running out of time. We've got one more question here from Antimo. And you've kind of touched on this already before I want to ask you that last question, but give us your idea on what is the one action we can take as individuals?
Thank you, Antimo, for that question. I want to say that be intentional. Be intentional about everything that you do. Who is it that you buy from? Who is it that you work with? Who is it that you invest in? Educate yourself in terms of the businesses that you interact with. And the other thing I want to encourage is share your knowledge. Talk to at the dinner table. Share with your partner, share with your family. It's like, this is what I found out about this business today. This is how they're doing and creating an impact on society. This is how they're having more sustainable practices, or this is how they're helping their supply chain. And I think by doing that, if all of us just did that, to your point, James, earlier, if 7 billion of us just did one little thing, I think we can really shift that conversation and have transformation happen in the business world at large.
I love how that's a theme you've created in this book, that it's not about starting with anything profound. It's about starting with something really, really easy to do, and having that cumulatively lead to something more profound. Speaking of profound, the last question I want to hear from you on is, what is your hope for the next 3 years? I'm not going to say for the future, because that's always a little bit, too far out there, but 3 years from now,
Yeah,
what would you like to see have happened to from the world, whatever, however you want to answer it, but like for change to have taken place? What's in your heart that you hope to see?
My hope, and it's actually also a little bit of my prediction, that non-financial metrics become mandatory reporting for companies. And I have a little bit of an insight into this because the World Economic Forum produced a proposed 21 stakeholder capitalism metrics, so that falls into 4 big pillars of governance, people, planet, and prosperity. So that means like, how many jobs are you creating within the community? Are you paying, how much taxes you're paying from a corporate income perspective, from payroll, for sales tax? So this is talking about then value creation for the community at large. So my hope is that this becomes mandatory, so that we're able to look at companies in a transparent way and in a holistic way. It's integrated, and it becomes much easier to analyze and to see what companies are really doing. And then on a more individual level, I hope that each one of you will take what we have today, what we've talked about today, and share it at the dinner table tonight, and that this conversation becomes bigger with each of us. And for that, I want to offer you, as a thank you, the audience, and to you, James, and to Sanjeev as well, who is behind the scenes helping us out with the comments and with logistics today. I want to offer you the ebook of the Altruistic Capitalist. Email me, let me know. Fantastic. Who would you like me to share this book with, so that we can start talking about it openly and stand up for something that we believe in. Because I believe that when we start with purpose, the profit will come later. That will come naturally.
Lynn, it's a fantastic book. I've had the chance to read it. For those of you who are watching and would like to get your hands on a book, email Lynn at lynn@altruistcapitalist.com. She will make sure you get a copy of the ebook sent to you so you can read it without wasting paper. Even more fantastic. Lynn, thank you for joining us. We're really excited about the launch of your book. We're super excited to see where this can go. I want to encourage everybody who took part today to spread the word, get people talking about it, let them know about the book. It's one of the most transformational things you'll read. It's not huge, so it's pretty easy to read, and you've written it so beautifully. So thanks to everyone who joined us from around the world. Thank you to Lynn for being here and taking us through it. And I wish you all the best, and hopefully in 3 years we can see some major change. Thanks, everyone.